So we'll just start with the Karakia. Jamie.
That one, that's the one. Kia ora. Ko rangi nui e tui honei ko papatua nuku e tākoto nei a tēnā kōrua. Huri ki te hunga mate, haere, haere, haere atu rā. Ki a mātou, tō mātou hoa, te pau, tētahi pau o te kōmiti nei. O mātou, tō mātou hoa, Chris, moi mai rā e hoa. Huri noa ki te hunga ora, ngā tangata kua taimai i te rānei, tēnā koutou, me karakia tātou. Tūtawa mai i runga, tūtawa mai i raro. Tūtawa mai i roto, tūtawa mai i waho. Kia tau te mauritu, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tāaki e. Kia ora koutou. So just as a bit of an explanation, I did a bit of a mihi to Rangi, the Sky Father, and Papatuanuku, the Earth Mother, to start us off, and then turned our thoughts to those that have passed away recently, including one of the Pou, or one of the stalwarts of this committee, being Chris Allen, and then turning the thoughts to those in the room, to the living, and then starting it all with a karakia. So the karakia that I did was about summoning like the energy from the environment, from around us, to support us, provide us with vitality, and also unite us together as well. So that's my brief kind of explanation of the karakia and my kupu just now. I'm going to hand it over to the chair, Bill, to carry on.
Thanks, Jamie, for explaining that. I just want to also acknowledge Chris Allen is a very capable farming leader. He was a vice chair and very good, and he always used the phrase, show me the science. So when people made a presentation and he didn't think it was up to it, he'd say, show me the science. And that was the only time he'd accept it. He was also good company, always looking ahead, intelligent, good family man, and yeah, good guy. There's an old proverb, footprints in the sand of time are not made by sitting down. And Chris didn't sit down. So we'll just stand for a moment. Thank you. That's great. Thanks very much. Okay. Now, we've got some apologies, Jamie.
Yep. So for apologies, we've received one from Sydney, who can't make it today. And then for lateness, we have Councillor Ian McKenzie. Yes, actually, just Ian McKenzie, and just noting to everyone that the Ngāi Tuahuriri Runanga representative seat is now vacant by virtue of the standing orders.
Okay, well, I'll move that those apologies are accepted. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Ange. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. I'm just going to move. We've got a good public gallery here, and it's open meeting, and it'd be quite good to have people to participate. So I'd just like to move from the chair that will let the public speak at the meeting if they wish to. So I'll move that. Seconded from Neil. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thanks very much, and thank you everyone for your attendance. Any extraordinary business that is to come up at the moment? Nothing there. Register of interest. Everyone has to declare their register of interest in the committee papers. Up to you to keep it up to date, and that has been done as far as I'm aware. Confirmation of the minutes. The minutes have been circulated. I believe they're a true and accurate record of the meeting. Is there any comments on the minutes that anyone wants to raise? Angela?
Yeah, if I may. In our November meeting, point 9, there was a presentation by Adrian Meredith, Principal Ecan Scientist, about the Ashburton Hakateri hapua. At the time there was quite a bit of lively discussion around the presentation, but one of the questions I raised was, which at the time Adrian was unable to answer, was the context of the season that the monitoring had happened. So it was 2020 and 2021, I think both sort of January, February, which we all can recall were particularly dry periods, because they were followed by the May 2021 flood, which put all the completely tipped the balance. So whilst Adrian undertook to come back to us, I've since found some information which I'd like included. The meeting was recorded and within that discussion, but it talks about in February 2021, the Ashburton River had been in a low flow state for more than 13 months. Gives some stats on that, which will have significantly limited the river mouth openings. The average daily flow for 2020 was the lowest on record and even lower than the drought years of 2015 and 2016. So that was the context I was asking for at the time. Adrian was unable to provide it, but I didn't feel satisfied that that presentation was left where it was, without opening up the discussion perhaps again. And I can speak confidently to say that if Chris was here, he had some concerns that he also raised as part of that discussion. So I'm not sure how we proceed with that, but I'd like that recorded, please.
So what you would like is an amendment to the minutes that Adrian Meredith was asked to return with some information.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide the graph and the evidence, which is all publicly available.
I think in the minutes, for the matter of the minutes, we just record that Adrian Meredith was to return with some information. So would you like to move that amendment to the minutes?
I would, thank you, like to move that amendment.
I'll second that. All in favour? Aye, carried, thanks, you got that. All right, Karen. And then you've now presented the information you've presented, which will be extraordinary business, so which you've presented. That's good, so that be accepted. So thanks, Ange, well done. So if that's all, I'll move those minutes as true and accurate. All those in favour? Aye. Against, carried, thank you. That's the minutes done.
Mr. Chairman, is there still some outstanding questions to be answered from that presentation still, or have they all been answered?
Ange, do you think there's still?
I spent some time with the recording again this morning. Unfortunately, I didn't get all the way through it. So, yes, I think there possibly will be. Could I perhaps gather that information and send it through to Carol retrospectively with the questions? I'm also aware that there's other people in the gallery who are very familiar with that report, or the three reports, and the concern that I've shown has probably been shown a bit more widely with people that actually watched the recording. So I almost wonder whether there's an opportunity to have a right of reply if we could gather the information, or I don't know what the best process is, but bring that back to a subsequent meeting.
Okay, so we'll send a note to Adrian Meredith that we expect a satisfactory reply to those questions that were asked. So there will be some more information coming. Is that right, Jamie?
Yeah, I'll just flag that Tim Davies' email
Okay.
about science advice.
Right. That's correspondence.
Yeah.
So the next one is correspondence. Have you got anything that you need to?
Just like a
Turn your
note
mic.
in response to that. Kia ora koutou. I'll just note, as part of correspondence, there was an email that went to Zone Committee chairs and deputies from Tim Davey, the Director of Science, and it was just noting that the science team were capacity was very limited, and as a consequence they were unable to supply advice or present to Zone Committees until at this stage March, April, so that might have a bit of an impact in terms of a response to the committee.
Okay.
I think in this instance the beauty of it is because it's publicly available, we're not asking for science, we're just wanting it as part of the wider discussion, if that helps.
Thanks, Jamie. I think you've got to turn yours off as I'm talking. Was there any other correspondence?
Yes. Should I carry?
Yeah, you carry on.
Okay. Cool. Also in December, I've sent around an email received, sent to Bill from Craig Fleming from the Boundary Drains Trial Consent Group. The Zone Committee has the information that is currently available, just noting that it is still a work in progress and there are internal conversations still to be had at ECAN. So that was the second piece of correspondence. And then in Outward last year, Bill, I think it was in 16th of December, Bill received a letter from Green Street, essentially notifying and looking for support for a proposal, a proposed solution that they were taking to Environment Canterbury to augment the water flow. So that was sent around to the committee for feedback and to see if there was any objections. There was a bit of urgency around it, so it couldn't be put through a formal meeting, but everyone was happy with it, and a letter was sent to Environment Canterbury, basically in support of the solution and encouraging Environment Canterbury to continue working with the Catchment group. So just confirming that letter as well.
So we'll just move that correspondence be accepted. I'll move that as a second of that. Thanks, Richard. All in favour? Okay, thank you. Public contributions, which, as I've said, you're welcome to make a contribution when you're, if you want to, and when you do, I'll notify you from the chair, and you can just come and speak on one of these speakers, because as it's online as well, no one will be able to hear if we don't use it. Right, now for a committee that's just about to be disbanded, we're still going to have an election, which is always a bit of fun. So I'll have to go and stand over there or sit in the Mill's throne or whatever, and you run the election.
There's a seat for you.
Thanks.
Kia ora koutou. So every year, as per the terms of reference of the committee, a chair and deputy are normally appointed. So we'll start the process with the chair. Bill has expressed a willingness to continue on as the chair for 2025. So I'll just ask that someone nominate him and second.
Happy to make that nomination.
Okay. Angela and Claire. Okay. Perfect. And are there any other nominees? No, okay. Shall I do deputy now, Carol, or vote for
Over
you?
here. Jody?
No, he's been
You can do deputy too, it's good practice.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay, moving on to deputy. Claire Buchanan has expressed an interest in being the in taking up that role. So could I have a nominee and a seconder?
I'll be very happy to nominate.
Okay, Bill nominating and Richard seconding. And are there any other nominees? No? Okay. All in favour of Bill Thomas for chair and Claire Buchanan for deputy chair? All in favour? Perfect. I can hand over. Bill, congratulations.
Thank you for your support, and look forward to working with Claire. Right, so that's that deal too. Zone, so we're into our key subject. Jamie, do you want to introduce it?
Okay, I'll just do a brief introduction and invite Cameron Smith, the Environment Canterbury Senior Strategy Manager, forward to the table. So over 2024, on the approval of the Canterbury Mayoral Forum, the CWMS Zone Committee review was undertaken. As you know, you were involved in, the Zone Committee was involved in workshops, as well as workshops with the territorial authorities, mana whenua, and a working group was formed as well. Back in November, recommendations were put to the Canterbury Mayoral Forum, who made some endorsements as noted in the paper. I might invite Cam to take over from this point so I don't go astray. Cam, do you want to pick up where I've left off?
Excellent, thank you, and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about the Zone Committee review. As Jamie had noted, is that echoing? Is that all right? That's all right. As Jamie had noted, the Mayoral Forum initiated a review, you're no stranger to this, in the end of 2023, and we spent a lot of last year through the 2024 calendar year engaging across zone committees, Orunanga reps, conversations with a number of councils, to actually understand what has been working, what hasn't been working, and what the future may hold. And so, as Jamie referenced, we had a Mayoral Forum paper in the end of November last year, and this sought direction on next steps. And within that, the Mayoral Forum was very clear to acknowledge that Some committees are working quite well, but there is varied performance across the 9 existing zone committees within Canterbury. And what they endorsed was is exploring further this idea of new local leadership groups. And so this is detailed within the paper, but in essence, these new local leadership groups are at their base formed of territorial authority representative, regional council representative, and mana whenua representative. But what the mayors were very clear on is that connection to community remains important, and we're starting to really unpack what the purpose of these is as well, because form should always follow function. And where we've been heading with a working group that Jamie referred to is these groups helping align work of the various councils in mana whenua with regard to work associated with freshwater at place, looking at and making connections with the local community, catchment groups to align council work programs with all the great work that's happening within the community, but also help prioritise some of the actions that could drive council action. And so alongside the Zone Committee review, we've also got a 2025 has also been tabled for an assessment against the CWMS targets. And so while it's not referred to in the paper here, we're targeting having a targets report go to the Middle Forum in May of this year. That targets report against the CWMS goals, progress against the CWMS goals, is going to clearly identify that a whole bunch of really good work has been happening, but we still need to continue on with that considerable effort if we are to make progress against some of those goals. So we're looking at these new local leadership groups to actually help identify what might the key priorities be, building off the great work that's been happening with zone committees, help align and connect into the local community action that's been happening, and help drive council action in that space as well. Now, what we're targeting is we're over the month of March, we are talking to each and every TA across Canterbury. We've got time here at Ashburton District Council, I think on the 12th of March, which we'll be presenting to Ashburton District Council, and we're doing it with each of the 10 councils across Canterbury. We're also connecting with each of the Papatapu Runanga across Canterbury and looking to have time with them as well. Because what we want to do is make sure that we have got support of this, and we can hear from each of the councils, how do they want to connect in with community. Now, we know if we look up north to Kaikoura, they've said they want to see something very similar to a zone committee. The zone committee works very well. They think having ongoing community membership, there's like strong rationale for that within that committee. Elsewhere we haven't heard reflected the same, and so that's what we're going to be testing over the next month. And then we'll be in a place to finish our advice and analysis over the month of April, reporting back to the Middle Forum for final decisions in May. Now, one of the key questions, concerns we've had is the kind of ongoing nature of this review and the lack of clarity about what it means for zone committees here and now. And I do appreciate that there is ongoing uncertainty. However, we absolutely require a conversation with each and every territorial authority, because zone committees are, each zone committee is a joint committee between Environment Canterbury and the territorial authority. And so while the Mural Forum, the Canterbury Mural Forum, can make endorsements about a consistent Canterbury approach, we need to be having conversations with each and every territorial authority to actually understand what it is they want from in the future with regard to these local leadership groups or zone committees. And so that's what we're targeting through following the Mural Forum meeting in May. We'll be following decision papers on that with each territorial authority in June, so we can get clarity on the proposed new local leadership groups and how they might differ from zone committees at place across Canterbury. I know there's a lot of people at the back here, and I'm sure you have questions as well. I'm all ears, and I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Cam. Unfortunately, I don't suppose you've got this slide here, James. Can you put that up on the screen?
Did you want the words or the picture?
Well, the picture will do.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
the picture. Just to make it clear to everyone that the new proposed leadership structure that ECAN is presenting at the moment has got territorial authorities, which is basically District Council, mana whenua, and then the Regional Council, and that's in their in a circle and everything else is on the outside. And I feel that, you know, we need to be inside that group, because to make a decision, you've got to be part of it. And no, we won't, a community group, I don't know where these local interest groups are all going to be formed that sit on the outside and really don't, a sort of quasi-group, really don't have any influence. And even though you can't probably, a group inside couldn't make a binding decision, but at least it could be listened to and understand why ECAN and Marawhenua are making some adjustments that we don't understand or won't work. And so we like to be in that core leadership group, and we want to be in the game rather than try and set up interest groups on the back. So now you've seen the program, so that's just a bit of an outline of what's happening here. So anyone who's got a question for Cam?
I'm happy to start. Thanks, Cam, and welcome. I'm looking at the considerations for the future zone committees and local leadership, which has come out in some of the correspondence, and emphasise local freshwater leadership. So I think we probably need to better define local with some of our communities of interest. The collaborative approach remains crucial. I'm going to have to say that I'm struggling to see evidence of that, and have been since we've kind of started quietly being cancelled. The importance of maintaining strategic oversight for on-the-ground activities, including catchment groups. Catchment groups are mentioned a lot, and that's increased significantly over the past 12 months, catchment groups, community groups. However, during my time of involvement there, and I'll do a sidebar excluding our elected ECAN councillor, there's little to no evidence that Environment Canterbury value the grassroots local community approach. There's serious questions over resourcing that model and enabling community-led going forward. So if we're going to talk about catchment groups, what does a lot of talk, but we're not seeing any evidence behind it of that willingness for that enabling space. It feels like a lot of planning and strategy comes across the Rakaia Bridge, but very little of the enabling and the good stuff gets back up to Tuam Street and back inside the corridors. So I'd like to see more of that, or evidence of what we think that could look like. We do need to maintain diverse community influences on strategic directions. 100% has to be urban and rural. I think if we all think back to the community vision work that was undertaken here in mid-Canterbury, with over 600 people consulted and inputting into what does the future look like in mid-Canterbury from an economic, environmental, social and cultural perspective. We took the time, thanks to our mayor, to travel up to Christchurch and present it to Environment Canterbury councillors. I'm not sure where all that landed, or if that landed, or what happened with that, but we got little to no feedback on. So here's a community trying to engage and show local leadership. And you talk about the need for shared learning spaces that help build capability and capacity. I would welcome that, and I'd like to know which department within Environment Canterbury I could go and have a chat to start unlocking some of what's been talked about in the document.
I can comment on those comments. I don't think that there's a question. I can get back to you on who to talk to. We've heard loud and clear when we've talked to the Mayoral Forum, but we've also talked to our councillors, and I'm sure Councillor McKenzie can back this up, and particularly with the role of catchment groups. And so, as you well know, and like just there's so many catchment groups now, and we don't have and our councillors have made very clear we need to enable rather than, and sensitively connect rather than have any overbearing role. And so, but we don't yet. One part of the zone committee review has been, well, what is the relationship with zone committees now that we've got catchment groups? And what's Environment Canterbury in particular, our role with regard to connecting with catchment groups? Is it like an organic process in that it's one by one, or what's the shared approach? And we've been building on the workshop that was had with catchment groups within Canterbury, having a workshop within Environment Canterbury as well to establish that. We haven't got it down yet, but it's a really good question, and we are working on that.
Thanks, Bill. Just looking at the table, the picture on the board, and I'm looking at the inside the circle of core leadership groups, and there's territorial authorities, the mana whenua and regional council, which all should be there. As me, I'm looking at territorial authorities because that's the bit that I lead. So who would be in that core group for territorial authorities? Would the council of, say, Ashburton appoint, pick a number, 5 people as their representatives to go in there? Then mana whenua would pick their representatives, as would the regional council. And if that was what was intended, how many would each one get, or how big would that group be?
So within the work for this year, we've noted that there's a few key questions that we need to work on, because while agreeing to a model like that is well, some of those questions need to absolutely work through, and some of those options presented back to both the Mayoral Forum and territorial authorities. Some of those questions are, like you said, Mayor Brown, what does that membership look like on each of those groups? How many councillors or how many mana whenua representatives? The geographic scope of those groups. Are we looking at kind of like for like across zones, or do we look across freshwater management units, or is it across the district, or is it something else? One of the other things we also need to provide advice back to the Mayoral Forum on is, and are these joint committees again, or are they something else, a collaborative agreement, or whatever it might look like? We've got experience with a few different models across Canterbury now. We've obviously got the joint committee approach through zone committees, but we've also got collaborative agreements that we have in some places, such as Littleton Harbour, or we have Mokahi down in Mackenzie, and so those will be some of the options that we need to work through and then present back to the Mayoral Forum and ultimately to each council.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's Richard Wilson. Yeah, it leads a wee bit on from that. So from that, can I'll call them a zonal committee or core leadership, can they be each one be different?
Yes. And this is kind of the nuance, because we are hearing different things from across Canterbury, and I think as kind of Mayor Brown would know at the Mayoral Forum table, there's differing views on zone committees, and some don't want to see much change at all, and some do want to see some change. And so this is why we're thinking the core leadership group would be the consistent bit across Canterbury, but then how they connect to the community, i.e. do they want permanent community representatives sitting around that table, will be a discussion for each of those groups. I'm envisaging, back to the Kaikoura example, that they'll say we very much want community representatives to be sitting alongside as within that table on a full-time basis. But that might look different somewhere else, and we're trying to have that conversation about what that connection looks like, how formal that connection is, to be based at each and every TA, just to kind of address or best suit local needs.
So probably my comment is that it'd be great to understand that the decision making is made locally, which is this our district council place. It's mid Canterbury, it's Ashburton district. So we would expect to be making the decisions for our district, and if it gets split up and spread out too much, the decision making gets lost. And it actually, so in the room we have local representatives. We have Mackenzie as I would expect him to be leading the charge as the decision maker of what happens in our zone. We have our mayor, it's our district, we have our runanga, which make the decision, rather than it being made out of Christchurch outside, because that's what concerns me with that plan. It's being driven by the greater ECAN group rather than the local representative. And if it's a greater group, we've had that happen, we will lose control and we won't get the outcome that we want here.
Yeah, while still to be tested with the Mayoral Forum, that's our intention at the moment, is actually if you have your local environment Canterbury councillor and a TA councillor and mana whenua, them making that decision around what that community connection looks like for Ashburton, say.
Just clarification, Councillor Wilson talked about decision making, and at the moment the zone committees can only make recommendations. So with just any clarification, whatever format we get to, would they be decision makers or would they be recommenders?
Absolutely, and this is all detail we haven't worked through, but from Councillor Wilson, I took that decision making on community membership might be made within that group. But what we're seeing these groups as helping kind of recommend back into councils where some of that effort and where some of the focus should sit if we were to deliver on CWMS targets. So it's more of that recommendation making back into councils about where to focus the effort.
And I'm sure it would also be helpful if a recommendation came from a zone committee that when it went to the decision makers in either Ashburton District or Environment Canterbury, that their recommendations were followed up with what they were recommended and then the decision made from their recommendation. That would then mean the local people who live and breathe the local world they live in get to make good decisions, recommendations to the higher authority for their area.
Yeah, absolutely. And through your chair, that's what we've learnt through the zone committees, particularly when we went through all the sub-regional planning, etc., was the extent to which councils picked up those recommendations and gave them as much value as possible when implementing regional plans.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Bill. This sort of going back to Councillor Wilson's questions about how local will it be, and what is the hierarchy that will sit in that core leadership group, and will you, because when I look at the way local leadership has tried to do things, it tends to go to Christchurch and Tuam Street, and it gets diluted and then lost. And when in the history of Runanga engagement is when they don't like what's going on, they tend to withdraw from the organisation and then operate behind the scenes of it. And I questioned about the Runanga's commitment to making this new model work the other day at council. So I'm elaborating on that same question really, because if, for sake of argument, the mayor and the councillor for the regional council agrees that we should find a solution to Lake Hood, but the Runanga doesn't, well, the Runanga, where's the hierarchy? Does the regional council then in Tuam Street say, no, we'll side with Runanga, and the mayor and the local councillor down here will be overridden, which has happened with the Managed Aquifer Recharge project, for example, or will the advice that comes out of the local core leadership group be sacrosanct despite one or other parties not agreeing? Because this is absolutely critical to have faith in that the new model that you're proposing is going to work, and that we're not just going to be effectively run by decisions made in Tuam Street which overrides decisions down here. Because we, as Anne just said, we've got catchment groups, we've got the HH Wet Trust, all of which are trying to progress priorities outlined in the zone implementation plan. But a large part of the time we keep finding frustrations put on us from outside this district to actually achieving some of the environmental outcomes we're trying to achieve. And I guess that's sort of what the mayor and Richard and various others are trying to articulate. Where's the reassurance that these core leadership groups will actually be delivering what the community wants, and that purpose isn't clear in this paper.
Yeah, absolutely. If these groups don't provide much value and can't provide support kind of community efforts, they won't hold much value for very long, and it'll be interesting to see how whether or not there's value in having these for 2 years. We've been very clear, and this is why we're working on purpose at the moment, that these things need to provide value to the local community within a year or two. Otherwise, we'll really need to relook at them. From a Runanga perspective, I can't speak to a Runanga commitment to these. We've been having a working group with some Runanga representatives, and it's been a really valuable process, and that's why we're going and discussing with each Runanga over the course of the next 6 weeks. But absolutely, we'd expect some of those negotiations to happen at within each of those local leadership groups, but we haven't, and I'm not sure if we will, articulate kind of the hierarchy of decision making from the outset.
You know, if you're talking about Runanga participation, I've noted that I don't think a single Runanga member on any zone committee lives in this district, and yet they have a say as to what this district should or shouldn't do. And that's based on mana whenua. I understand all that, but in fact they still seem like people from outside the district telling people inside the district what to do, and that is not necessarily particularly constructive. And I guess, you know, you could look at this proposal here and suggest that this is just a way we're going to have, you know, representatives from the district councils, from the regional council and mana whenua sitting in Tuam Street making decisions for the sub-districts, which would go down rather badly. Yeah.
And that's absolutely not the intention. Again, this is being driven through the Mural Forum, and that's ultimately where the endorsement for the kind of the regional approach will come, and then it will be driven through conversations with each and every territorial authority. So if each and every council across Canterbury, they need to be comfortable with this approach. So that's how it's being driven through the Mural Forum rather than Environment Canterbury branded initiative.
Thanks, Cam. I think, Duncan, you've got a question. If you just come up and use the speaker and just introduce yourself, please. Thanks. This one here. Get on.
One of the silver ones down.
That one. Yeah, thanks, Cam. Thanks, Bill. I guess, Cam, the worry that people have with this sort of setup is, at the moment, we feel that we've got a really engaged community here at the moment. Look, I understand that some zone committees aren't functioning how they should. We have got one that seems to be functioning really well here. The danger we see as a community is if we don't define those rules of engagement and where it goes to real clear right at the start and have a strong mandate, the community can get up and talk, and it's just not listened to, and this is just another way of shutting local leadership out rather than including them. So to get this across the line, I think the challenge is to make sure that those rules of engagement are really clear right at the start, that we don't just, you know, that the community gets lost. As Angela alluded to, 18 months ago, there was over Plan Change 8, the community engaged 670 people, and we've got a really engaged community, and we just don't want to be shut out of, that decisions are made in Tuam groups. Look, I speak on behalf of, as the chair of Mid-Canterbury Catchment Collective, where we presented to the long-term plan of ECAN, and basically, but for funding to keep it up, and over the last year or two, we're getting more and more people talking about the importance of catchment groups and the whole movement. No one funds it and is prepared to fund things going forward. So there's challenges there. So if you're going to say you want to talk to community groups, there needs to be one funding mechanism, but make sure there's a purpose in there as well, and make sure that's really clear, and not just let it get fudged off and butchered out to say, oh, we'll listen, and then have a process that no one can get to. There is scepticism in the community. That is your challenge for change. You'll always get that with change, as you know. So it needs to be really clear mandates. Who's responsible at what point? So if the Mural Forum puts in a recommendation, that recommendation can be seen by the community, that goes up to Tuam Street. If it goes for, that's good. If not, we need clear passage back. We also hear that with the change of structure in ECAN at the moment, people just don't know who and where to go to. So this just, dare I say, it sounds like another shutdown of Tuam Street. And if you've got a problem, just phone the 0800 number. And that's not what our community wants. We want a voice into the decision-making process within a really engaged community. So there's massive challenges there.
Thanks, Duncan. Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah.
You've got a comment to make, Cam?
No, but it'll just, again, this feedback's invaluable because this is what goes into the next round of advice to the Mural Forum. So it's, can absolutely action this. And I think particularly on the rules of engagement, I think it's a really good point that we can take to Mural Forum.
Thanks, Duncan. If I just add a wee bit just to follow on from that, Cam, it's been referred to the regional policy statement, which over 600 people in this community spent a lot of time organising. It was a very good document setting out the vision for the community, and we haven't seen the light of day. I mean, it hasn't been included in any ECAM plans I've seen, haven't been mentioned. So when you say you're going to include what we say, I've got serious doubts that it'll happen. When we talk to the community, what they want is balanced, informed and consistent decisions made. And the only way that that can happen is if we're in the middle, we're in that leadership group. We don't want to sit on the outside. So I think we want to make it very clear for you when you go back to talk, whoever you're going to talk to, we want to be in that leadership group. We understand that we haven't got the power to force in decisions, but we can be in the discussion because there's a lot of work gets put in by a lot of people, and it's quite a passionate area. And if you're not going to listen to us and we're going to sit on the outside, well, you know, you go to, next thing we'll look at a unity authority or something like that. But we're pretty serious that we want to be in that group. Don't make any misunderstanding that we're happy to sit outside. Yeah. Any other comments or things like that? Say, well, oh yes, Rebecca, please come up and have a speak and just introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Willens from Ashburton Lyndhurst Irrigation, and there's been lots of good discussion today. The only additional piece that I'd just like to add is I think by removing some of the people who are in the dotted circles around the outside from the discussion, it's a real lost opportunity. So the intention here, as I understand it, is to deliver on the Canterbury Water Management Strategy, and to deliver on any kind of a strategy you need buy-in of the people who have influence over the outcome. And you already have forums for territorial authorities, mana whenua and regional council, and I doubt very much that there's not some connection between those parties already. The thing that the zone committee's brought, or a forum that includes local community interest groups, industry and central government agencies together, is a forum of those that influence the outcome on the CWMS, all at the same place at the same time. And so I just think you need to make sure that you're not losing that opportunity. It may be that your core leadership groups are actually going to have the ability to appoint those people onto that panel, but the committee here today has been asked to discuss something or endorse it when they actually don't know what they're endorsing because you're unable to provide information on what their structure looks like or how it will operate. So I think that we all need to have a bit more background before we're able to provide an educated response to the request that's been made for feedback.
Very good, Rebecca. Cam, do you want anything? You just noting it down, or you got to?
Noting it down, very much.
Well,
Thanks, Rebecca.
I think Murray, are you noting it down, or do you want to say something? Okay. Well, is there any another at the back? Well, that's Rachel Thomas. Have to declare an interest as my daughter-in-law.
Hi everyone, so yes, I'm Rachel Thomas, Bill's daughter-in-law, but I'm a senior policy advisor with Federated Farmers. So our concerns with this diagram, and I apologise I haven't looked in detail at your report that's being referred to, but shutting out community from that circle is a huge mistake in our opinion, because the Zone Committee is such a great example of bottom-up collaboration. It's an internationally renowned example, actually. I did my thesis on it many years ago. But I just don't understand why something that is working well in some places would be disregarded, firstly. And then secondly, you refer to members being, people being able to be elected to the core leadership group. But effectively then, could you not end up with a zone committee if that group decided that they wanted to have all of these wonderful people sitting on that group? So I think that's probably something that ECAD should be open to.
And I'll just add, absolutely, because, and I'll go back to Kaikoura, they've said we don't want to see any change at all, but we absolutely have to go through this process because we have heard from some mayors that change is needed or review is needed. So we expect, in Kaikoura that they might appoint all those community members, and it would look very, very extremely similar to a zone committee. So I don't want anyone to think that communities being shut out of this. We're just saying, okay, let's take a step back, get those kind of three core parties and together, and then actually understand what the connection looks like with the community. And in some cases, you know, and hey, who knows if it's all cases, it might look very similar to the zone committee, but we've had to go through this process to say, test, we've been hearing concerns, here are some options that we've been working through with the working group and that we've been taking to the mayoral forum, and then those decisions about that community connection be made at place. And so you do have an Ashburton local leadership group making a decision around what that community connection looks like.
Can I just ask another question? Is this based on something which has been successful elsewhere in New Zealand, this model?
It's very interesting looking. We did analysis looking across New Zealand to see what's used elsewhere. There's no, there's not many enduring kind of solutions around something like this. So quite often they're done for when you're delivering a particular thing, a particular product, such as going through a plan change or a development of a regional plan. They'll typically kind of form these groups in order to make recommendations on a plan, get the plan across the road, and then the groups disestablished. And so obviously we're learning a lot from what we've done with the zone committees, but also learning what we've done with various kind of partnership programs across Canterbury. We have looked elsewhere, but there's no model that's really easy to pick up from elsewhere.
I'll add to that. So in other areas where I'm working, the structure already happens organically. So councils already work together and with mana whenua. So I just don't really see how kind of drawing the circle around it makes it any different to having nothing at all effectively.
I think that comes down to the purpose of these groups, and if we can get them to really clearly kind of, looking at the CWMS targets, and if you pick an ecosystem health target, for instance, and if that was to be kind of identified as the top priority within that group, helping align the work of those three organisations to the work within the community to deliver on some of those targets. And so it's just building a bit more of a structured approach around that to support implementation.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Mackenzie.
Just to make it clear, I think I don't think anybody's arguing for a retention of the existing zone committees. What we're looking for is a local leadership group, but that it's critical that locals have primacy within that local leadership group, and when those locals give advice as to what they want in terms of outcomes, let's use Lake Hood as an example. We want Tuam Street to listen to that local's advice and find a solution, help the community find a solution through the maze of plans and rules and regulations and everything else. And if the plans and rules and regulations aren't fit for purpose because they're getting in the way of a community outcome, that maybe there's a commitment from Tuam Street to review some of those. But at the moment we don't have that. We don't have that from the zone committee structure, and I'm not convinced that we're necessarily going to have it with this proposed structure.
Thanks, Ian. Ange?
One of the things I've been wondering, and I'd be interested to hear Mayor Brown and Councillor Wilson's thoughts, but we have the Ashburton District Council Biodiversity Advisory Group. So we have a group of interested parties that sit around and discuss biodiversity. I think this is a pretty shining example of an outcome of bringing different groups together to inform, and it's been a great space to advance some discussions around biodiversity. Potentially, is there the option to look for something similar, if we're looking for a similar outcome, to advise into our TA here, or what could that look like, only as a suggestion?
Good question, Ange. I think we need to be open to all entities or all opportunities that we can look at to get what we desire. And Ashburton could be different to Kokura's, it probably will be, because we're totally different. And the ADBAG group, they only recommend to council, and we take their recommendations on board, but they do not make us do things. They recommend only, and that works well. So it's something that could be looked at along those lines. Yep.
I think you bring up an interesting concept there, because we've done our biodiversity strategy, which was, we had buy-in from all sectors of the community, and that's where they come along to ADBAG and they understand, we call it ADBAG, They come along and they put forward their points, and we get a similar, dissemination, is that the word, of information across all those bodies they can bring and put it back, and then some things are sent to council to have, as the Mayor alluded to make a decision. And it's very interesting to see that we're having the wider Canterbury biodiversity strategy is up for renewal. So it'd be very interesting to see how we're going there with our view that our district has done its biodiversity strategy, and it's what our district and our community wanted. So we don't want to get overruled by ECAN in this process. So it's going to be a very interesting process to see how that eludes, because that goes to the core of how this will work. If our district's done its biodiversity strategy, goes to Christchurch, and we get told, no, you can't do that, it's a whole lot of things got to be changed by outsiders, I would say, that then this model won't work. If that's the outcome of that. So I'm waiting with bated breath, that's starting right as we speak. It's about to start that process. So I would use that as a stand alongside this, what we're going to do here.
And I can follow up on that.
Just another note. So Tony Durham's in the room. Tony undertook on behalf of ADC a review of the zone committee structure as well last year. Were there any outcomes, through that process? So it would be good to look more inwardly into ADC and look for, as a zone committee, ask what recommendations we could get back from what good looks like on behalf of our district. Is there a process that we could tap into there and unlock some of your findings, Tony, as well as the review that was undertaken by ECAN?
Thank you. Through the chair, kia ora everybody, Tony Durham, I'm the GM Democracy and Engagement here with Ashburton District Council. So yes, last year I did undertake a piece of work just looking around our Ashburton Zone Committee. It was very localised, very much looking at the good work that's happened since the inception of the Zone Committee and then where we are now, and there's still lots of good work going. The key finding out of that piece of work was that the role or the job or the function of the Zone Committee had changed, and so that influenced then the level of influence and degree of work that the Zone Committee was able to do. There's opportunity there to enhance things, but at the same time it all boils back down to the role and what the Zone Committee is actually trying to achieve. In terms of where that piece of work got to, it was reported back to council, and then by that stage the mayoral forum's work had kicked off, so it just fed up the line, and had numerous conversations with Cam and his team just to talk about what our findings were and talking about what our local experiences were, and that's helped to feed into that wider lens. So they've actually probably got a really good sense of what the Ashburton story is out of this process with having that piece of work underway. There's no list of do this and it'll solve X, Y, Z, if that makes sense, because it's quite a nuanced thing having a joint committee between a TA and a regional council, and it's about getting that form and function right, ultimately.
Thanks, Tony. If there's no more questions, I'd just like to thank you, Cam, for coming along and listening. What I would say is that it feels like death by strangulation because this process has taken way too long. You've got to shorten it up because you're going to lose members, and I think you are in other zone committees already, and already the science department won't reply to our request for science because they say they're too busy, haven't got time. I think because they think the zone committees are washed up, which they are obviously, but there's nothing in replace. So I think if you could put the foot on the accelerator and maybe communicate a bit more to all of us rather than just that inner circle, it would make things a lot more smoother and then less misunderstanding. And if you can see a way to do that, that'd be appreciated. Have you got a final comment you'd like to say?
I guess just responding to your last comment, we very much appreciate it that it has dragged on. But it's, the amount of work that has been actually in kind of engaging across zone committees last year, but also the nature of each and every conversation we have to have with each territorial authority does take time, and not only in meeting the needs of the mayoral forum as well. So we will look for opportunities to kind of expedite where we can, but it has been challenging. I'd just like to thank the committee for this opportunity today to come and speak. I'm definitely been recording notes, and I have team members in the back taking notes as well, and this will ultimately form that next bit of advice for the mayoral forum. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cam, for your attendance. And Murray, I'm disappointed we didn't hear from you. In the back. Cheers. Thank you. Okay. It was for the committee to receive the updated revived feedback, which we've done. I don't think we're endorsing what's going on, so I think we'll just note that we received the, in the minutes that we received the update and presentation from Cam. So I think the next one is the Mount Harding Stream Catchment Group. Janine, are you ready for action? Good. So thank you. So. Welcome, Janine. So you might just, you don't have to introduce yourself, but you can.
I'm Catherine Glass and a farmer in the foothills above Methven with the stream running through our farm.
Right, thank you very much to the Zone Committee for giving us this slot today. Apologies first on behalf of our Chairman, Steve Bikes, who's unable to join us. We had a deputation of 3 landowners and myself as facilitator of the group. And so Steve is unable to make it due to illness, and our other member, James Halford, who's one of our arable farmers, and this catchment group is predominantly arable farmers, and of course they're under a lot of pressure trying to get harvest out, and the conditions started looking a little bit better for this afternoon, so we've lost James. So you've got Catherine and myself, but we are representing a catchment group that really only came into being in the last year. We have landowners from Catherine's End, from just above State Highway 72 near Mount Hutt, all the way down to Winchmore. So it's a very long catchment, and it includes obviously Methven Township. So it's a very interesting catchment in that we've got urban and rural landowners in this group, and they've got very different reasons for being in it, but they're all very motivated. So in your agenda papers, you've seen a summary of the submission that we are hoping to put in next week to the Council's first stockwater public consultation for the Pudding Hill intake. We have been working on these issues. If I can just give a quick recap of the group, it came together probably more motivated by flooding and drainage concerns for the catchment. Various landowners at different parts in the urban part in Methven, but also in those lower reaches, we're experiencing quite problematic times with the creek in terms of drainage, flooding events, high rainfall events. So we dove into those issues quite quickly, but at the same time the council started consulting on its long-term plan and the stockwater network. It was proposed to be closed, so we were keeping a watching brief on how that progressed, and obviously that decision ultimately came about, and we've really quickly change focus to look at what the implications of that are for this creek. So we've spent a lot of time working with Environment Canterbury scientists, having liaison with the District Council, and Councillor Wilson's been good enough to come along to a couple of our meetings. So we've heard from some of the stockwater staff there. We've been very fortunate to have some information and data provided by Ashburton and Lyndhurst as well. That's helped us in terms of understanding the creek, its water quality, and what makes it so important in our catchment. So really this catchment group has come up with a strategy based on 3 things that they want to see for this creek for the future, and the first is retaining a viable minimum flow. For environmental purposes, for ecological purposes, to retain the habitat that's already within the creek that many landowners in this group have prioritised and invested in. The community also wants to be working together, urban and rural, to maintain the health of the waterway over the long term, and also wants landowners to be more empowered and have more autonomy around how we manage some of these drainage issues. So that's our strategy. And so we're probably first cab off the rank in terms of being a very active group involved with the stockwater consultation. Last week, council had a drop-in session in Methven, and the catchment group members mobilised quite a lot of the community to really understand what this might mean for the creek. By all accounts, we understand that stockwater supplementation is significant, and without it, and it's not just one intake that supports this creek, it's two. It's Methven Auxiliary as well as Pudding Hill. The creek will be quite a different beast without stockwater. So we are asking council, and we're coming with what we think is a considered solution as part of our submission, encouraged by Councillor Wilson to come back with an option as a group. Don't just come and say, look, there's a problem. We want to be part of the solution. We want to say we are prepared to help address this and we will play our part. So if I quickly take you into that. This is the essence of the submission that we'll present next week. We believe that this stockwater consent that exists shouldn't be just given up. We do understand that there are less customers paying for stockwater, but we have a community that we think, and what we heard from the 60 people who attended last week's drop-in, is that there is an appetite to retain this consent for environmental flow. So it would be a change of use. We would like to see council continue to hold that. We think it's actually quite difficult for a catchment group, even a catchment group that could be supported by a body such as the Methven Community Board, who we're working very closely with, and we have 2 of their members who have joined the catchment group meetings. For any of us as individuals or as a smaller catchment group to hold that consent. We do believe that there's a case that compliance discretion could be provided by ECAN. This is yet to be tested, but we do know that council staff are going into conversations with the regional council in coming weeks, and we'd really like to see that advanced. We have had it suggested to us this is another Green Street situation. We think it's quite different. There is an existing consent, and we're talking about repurposing. We've already raised with our members and our community the possibility of a targeted rate for our catchment community for ongoing maintenance. We are realistic that, we wouldn't be able to retain this consent and its associated costs without some rate coming on the community to support the retention of this water. So ultimately the catchment group and the community board, we see us working together on that objective of urban and rural coming together to keep this creek healthy and flowing, and obviously the irrigation scheme has interests in this area and is already working with its shareholders on this. The bigger picture is that, we need to think about climate resilience. We're already hear from landowners in our patch that those who have filled in their sections of the stockwater network regret it. We see unintended flow ending up in different places. The creek is a conduit for flood and stormwater flows, and Catherine will speak to this shortly from her experience as a landowner in the upper catchment. We have landowners that are seeing things since parts of the network have been shut off over successive years and just sections. This is the only significant surface water body on this side of the district, and it plays a really important role, and the water ultimately returns into the Ashburton River. So for environmental flow purposes, we're not talking about the water disappearing anywhere else and being used for anything else. Overall, we're saying no loss of flow. It keeps the community engaged. It would be a fantastic thing if this community could achieve it with council support, with the regional council support to protect this creek, its in-stream, its biodiversity values. And we can also speak to the fact that this creek is also significant for amenity and recreation values. We have kids, and if Steve was here, he'd be telling you this is one of his 3 sons playing in Time Stream. So there is a subdivision that's been built on the side of Methven, and it's all predicated really around the fact that this waterway flows alongside it. The Methven Walkway has been hugely advanced, and the Methven Lions, local school children, have planted it. ECAN actually supported and funded some of those native plantings. You would say every day anyone who lives alongside that walkway will see sometimes dozens, if not, in busy school periods, possibly hundreds of people are using that walkway. It's a real draw card for the area. Methven, we're biased, we live up this way, but, Opuki hot pools, we've got a lot of people coming into town. And here's this wonderful passive recreation asset that also has these ecological values, amenity values, biodiversity, projects right along it that landowners are invested in. And it has reasonable water quality, attested to by this young boy playing here. So we don't want to see this lost. That's really what we're here to advocate for. We're asking the Zone Committee to support us in our efforts. This is a joint committee. You've just been speaking about the future of the Zone Committee. This is one of the only places groups such as ourselves can come to a committee that has ECAN and District Council representation and ask for your support and ask you to work together on something that matters to this district. Yeah. Catherine.
Thanks, Janine. My concern as well, or our concern, is that we're isolating this issue just to be a stockwater issue. It's far more than the stockwater issue. There's the drainage, there's the ecology, that there's a whole lot that needs to be considered with this. And Methven doesn't want to be left with just a dirty old drain. We've seen seen races closed in our area. There's no mandate for people to keep those races open. So the races were originally set up, obviously, as stock water, but the pioneers of this, of these races, they did it so that it was part of the drainage. They took the springs and they went, we'll take this water and we'll put it over here. So what we're saying now is we don't want the water over there for stock water, but what's going to happen to the natural water, the springs, and so that's a huge issue as well. So with it being closed, so just the flooding, the water, the council will see that in their roading costs, the impact of the flooding of the roads. Sorry, I've got an awful lot to say, but I'm not really sure what else to articulate.
I think you've done well. We've got the gist of it, and I'm sure you can answer some questions, Councillor Mackenzie. And then once you've got going, and then we'll ask Councillor Wilson, because he's running the stock water system group. Or what do you do? Exit strategy.
So Donna, and as I understand it, the issue with the stockwater races, and Richard might confirm this, is the cost, the liability for having a fish screen on the, and that actually if you had no requirement for a fish screen at the point of take, there wouldn't be a major financial issue with keeping the Mount Harding Creek open. I mean, all the things you talk about in terms of why you want to keep it open, I understand. We have the Parakanoi flowing through our farm. The stockwater system's been closed down effectively. Above it, we used to have 7 stockwater races tail off into the Parakanoi. Parakanoi is now dry 8 months of the year, and it's a dead zone, and so we have just a flood channel that only operates when things are wet going down through our farm, which used to be a major feature of for the kids. My kids they kayaked and rafted down it, even in low flows. So I understand the emotive reasons for wanting to keep Mount Harding Creek open, but as I understand it, the reason why everybody wants to close it, or everybody being district and regional council, is because of this requirement for fish screens. So when you said, Donna, in your part of the presentation that the regional council is looking for some sort of discretion, is that discretion about the requirement for fish screen, or is it somewhere else, the discretion?
Yeah, it's around the fish screen requirement, yeah. That's what we're looking for, a compliance waiver, discretion. I mean, we can't ask for it as a catchment group. We need council who have the consent to have those conversations. I don't know where that sits. I mean, obviously, it's something that's actually been required for a long time. This is not a new requirement. So,
And look, if I can just carry on the conversation, I've asked for senior directors at ECAN to check on the requirements for fish screens for where there is no consumptive use, and where in fact you've got this fish, water take which now requires a fish screen when you're doing it to try to keep the fish alive and the environmental things in place. And when we did get permission to release water down Green Street Creek from O'Shea's, it seemed an absurdity that you're releasing water from O'Shea's into a Green Street Creek through a fish screen to stop the fish going in when you were releasing the water to save the fish in the first place. And there are plenty of other examples around the region, and there are stock water races that come off the Twizel River which are full of fish, and there are requirements now to try to think about how you put a fish screen on that, which are just clearly nonsenses, where the fish actually don't mind whether they go down the Mount Harding Creek or stay in the main river, and having free and equal passage. And the main purpose of fish screens in the first place was to actually stop fish from becoming privatised. And so Fish and Game argued for the requirements of fish screens. It wasn't to save the fish, it was actually to keep the fish in the rivers so their members didn't have to ask permission to go and catch fish. In this case, where the community is saying actually there are other values now, and the world has changed since the fish screen regulations were brought in, and I was trying to gauge as to where the responsibility sits, but it does seem to sit with the regional councils rather than central government. The central government said you've got these provisions which enables the regional councils to enforce fish screens, but I think the regional councils do have discretion. I've asked the senior staff look at that discretion and haven't got very far to date, but look, I'll continue to, having a specific example is quite good, so I'll keep trying to do that.
that would be great. I mean, we have put this in through the local office, and we have had some willingness to entertain the conversation, but I guess we've got to ask the council, as the holders of the consent at the moment, to equally have that appetite to enter those conversations with ECAN. Otherwise, it's theoretical. We don't hold the consent, so we can be asking, what if, could this work? But we need the consent holder to say, yes, actually, we've got an interest and we may entertain doing that ourselves. We will keep having those conversations with ECAN staff. We appreciate your support and would like to see you continue to have those conversations with senior staff as well.
Well, I'll ask Richard as the chair of the exit strategy.
Well, no, thanks for coming in today. It was a good presentation. Just to give you a brief idea of how the process is working. So the Greater Council resolved to exit stock water. And when we say exit, we don't mean close all the races. We mean exit the management of the stock water. So when I say stock water, I'm not talking about waterways. I'm talking about stock water. So we then set up a core group of people, which includes 3 councillors, a representative from ECAN, from Runanga, and Federated Farmers. And then outside that, we have wider stakeholders, because if you're looking at one section of the county's water races, you don't want everybody in the whole county. There'll be specific groups, such as your group. So we'd be using you as part of, when we do these individuals, that group. So how the process works is, first off, we send out a survey to the actual users. So they're like people that are connected and used to the race and actually have stock that drink out of it. And they find out whether they want it and what other supplies they could do. That's from a user point of view. And then we look through that, and then the next lot we go out with is to the wider community, which is what you alluded to. We had a drop-in at Methven, we had 60 people, it was a good response. And then anybody can put in a survey from that, and ideas, this is exactly what we're looking for, ideas with some solutions, because you don't just say, I want it left open, because then someone else has got to think, how do we do that? And how do we pay for it? And how do we fund it? And the problems. So at the moment, we're in that process where we haven't closed the survey with the Pudding Hill stream. So Pudding Hill and the Methven Auxiliary, they're the two that they're sort of linked. You know, one, they both supply the Mount Harding stream, but one sort of crosses it and one goes down. So the next part is the wider community involvement with Methven Auxiliary is from the 13th of March to the 9th of April. And that's so you could have a second bite of the cherry there. So once we've got all that information in, that'll be compiled and that'll go to the core group, which again has good representation of different groups, and we'll have a talk, and if we don't come to consensus, that information will be then sent to the council to make the final decision. So the process is quite open, and as you've said, the fish screen problem, that will be recognised in the process, that community requests and the ecological things will be recognised, and so hopefully we can come to the right outcome of it all. But that's an excellent submission. The decision hasn't been made, it's still going through the process. Is there any?
Mayor Brown?
Yeah, it's a good summation of how the whole system's working from Richard, thanks. And yeah, stress, we're exiting, not closing. But if someone doesn't pick up a stream on the 1st July 2027, the council will shut the gate because they're not doing it anymore. And if you've got a spring on it like this one, that poses another problem. Whose does it belong to? Because it's it won't be council anymore on the strategy we're taking. But I do have some questions. You mentioned water quality. What's the water quality, the data you have on the stream? What's it like?
We don't hold the data, but we have had, I'm going to throw to Rebecca, we've had a presentation from Rebecca on behalf of Ashburton Lyndhurst quite recently about their water monitoring that they do on the creek.
Is it just a poor, good, high?
It's actually good.
Good,
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you see, as I said in this section, children, dogs, we don't have issues with, I mean, there are issues. There are some weed issues and there's some other stuff. And obviously we're all trying to improve the water quality as well. It's a work in progress, yeah.
It's a great question. We'd love to see the ecology reports that the council's done on this stream before they close it.
Have we done one?
Apparently, or you're working on it. I don't know. We haven't got the information.
We haven't, well, council hasn't either, but if it's being done, we will get it.
I think they're being commissioned, yeah. And as this group, we've requested, to see all that information as it comes in.
And another question is, if you wanted water in there, how many litres a second would you require?
Again, it's a great question. I think there's a hydrology report being done as well because currently the water that would naturally go into that stream is from the Awa Awa Reserve, which I think is 5 or 6 litres a second, so nothing. And then the springs, natural springs and drains, but again, that doesn't provide enough. So,
do you know what our consent is consented for? The council consent?
Yeah, although I can't quote it, but we have been provided that data from, you've got variable flow going on, you've got variable stock water use at times, so yeah, it's a very complicated system. It's been hard for even members of the group, and Richard referred to the fact that there's a water swap above Methven, so there's some water coming down and then it's going out the side and some different water coming into Methven. Landowners themselves and even those who are stock water customers are confused about where some of them are confused about what intake their water is coming from, yeah. But we do have the data and obviously, I mean, you guys are the ones who are monitoring that, yeah.
And if all goes to plan, we exit, you want this race, who would operate it? Someone would need to look after it and see that the flow is right, because council's out. We won't have any stock water ranges at all. We don't have any trucks. We will have nothing. We don't do it anymore. So who would operate it? Have you thought of that?
it's a great question. And we'd love to say that a group would pick it up, but as you know, it's a huge thing. And so what we're arguing is this is bigger than just Methven.
Yep.
This is one of the only streams at Mid Canterbury, apart from the Ashburton River. There's no other river. We don't know who would take it over. It's a huge beast to take over.
Yeah, that's good.
I would add to that, Neil, and say that, you know, we haven't got all the answers, but you can see that there's some early thinking there, and you've got joined up thinking between people across 20 kilometres. I think that's something to, you know, that is something, it's a starting point, isn't it? And you've got a community board who are on side and who have a vested interest and are also submitting on these intakes. So you've got people in the community who want to progress this and who want to come up with the approach, and a lot of them are the landowners who would be giving up access to their land for ongoing maintenance, who are already stock water customers or adjacent to that. So we believe there's a solution, but we just can't answer it all yet. You're talking about, a very busy time. The farmers are in our group, our arable guys are just trying to get through whatever little bit of harvest they can. So, we haven't, all that hasn't been worked out.
And
But we'd like to do it with
over
council.
time, but we're just asking those questions, and then that gets the thinking going, which is what we need to do. Yeah.
Just to answer your question about the flow, the water that you see in that creek, that's pretty much all of Ashburton water, all Pudding Hill stream water. That's
There's no springs in there at the moment.
there's hardly any. Yeah.
That's good. Stormwater, if you're collecting stormwater up above and it's raining and it carries on down, where does it all end up? Because the creek will only take so much, and then obviously the ones at the top will get rid of their stormwater, but the ones down below will be delivered that stormwater with their own stormwater. Someone's got to end up with it. Where does it go at the moment?
Well, currently the stock water ranger, he closes down the stock water intakes generally. So that is used as a conduit for stormwater.
Cut in to help answer that. There is a Mount Harding drainage flood rating district, which involves most of the landowners from, I think,
From Methven down to
Methven down to the bottom. So it's already there's already a targeted rate for those people is to manage the capacity of the drain of Mount Harding as a drain, and I've been involved with that group a little bit, sorting out issues.
The systems are already in place for drainage.
Yeah.
If you took stock water out, then there's another system in behind it, which so that it all needs to be talked about, discussed, and that's what Richard's group's doing.
And the only issue, as I understand it from a drainage perspective, is stormwater now coming out of Methven from the new subdivisions, which is tending to peak the flow. But talking to John Mackay's son, who's
Dean.
Dean, he just ECAN did some formation of Mount Harding Creek through his place, and maybe the place below him, just keep capacity where there's banks that come in. So I don't think, my understanding, and I'm not an expert on Mount Harding Creek, is capacity for stormwater is not a major issue, as long as the maintenance is kept up.
Just to clarify one thing, so the council infrastructure team, which is stormwater and Methven, are involved in the discussions as well. So when we talk about the stormwater ramifications for Methven, that's like an infrastructure type thing that's being talked about at the same time. Probably the only call, and as the Mayor's alluded, our working group does have an ECAN representative on there, and I can put the call to ECAN to turn up at those meetings with some constructive, input. This is not just a reporting back thing. This is perhaps what the zonal committee could be as well. Council's engaged, Runanga are very engaged. We want ECAN to be engaged, so that if they're engaged, the fish screen thing can go back with a strong mandate from the community to say this needs to be sorted out. We don't want the council to have to then spend huge amounts of money with the community direction on getting consents for something that ECAN should be helping us do. So we just need that message to get back. We want engagement. We don't want just blocks and, we can't do it, or just a one-way traffic sort of thing.
Thanks, Richard.
Can I
Angela?
just...
Andrew, have you got a question?
I was just going to add to those drains, which is the stock water races when I refer to the drains. When they are turned off, there is no requirement for the owner of that land to keep them open. So the council can, from what I've been told, you cannot say, hey, look, if you just wouldn't mind leaving that drain there to use as stormwater drain. So you close these stock water races, it's gone, it's all on. It's just overground. So,
Can I just raise a point in the not too distant past that Environment Canterbury actually did quite a comprehensive report on Mount Harding Creek, which Donna Field, I can't remember the name of the other gentleman, co-authored it, presented to the Zone Committee and talked about the creek in its whole, and we all agreed it was a very important waterway and needed to be protected, and yes, stockwater was so kind of fast forward to where we're at now. So ECAN are actively been advocating for that waterway in the not too distant past. So I just think that's worth mentioning. And then fish screens, my goodness. I mean, we hear so much about them, but they seem to be this mystical beast. I understand that the figure is in the vicinity of 3 million. I can't confirm that. So we're not talking about an insignificant amount of money. My other understanding is that this whole fish screen debate's gone on for about 15 years now in this circle and never really landed anywhere. Is there any fish screen advice that we could independently seek? Because I understand some people have actually really got the bit between the teeth with the discussion, and more of a kind of let's dip in and dip out of the conversation. So would some independent advice on fish screens be worthwhile from a consenting or compliance discussion?
I'll just butt in there because we're getting quite operational. I think it's a good question which we'll come back to, but just summing up, I think we had a quick look up and I think it's about 420 litres a second that are flowing down there. You have got time, Mayor Brown was saying 2027, I think, is that 1st of July, and the consent expires in 2032. And I think one thing we have learnt from what we saw with the at Lake Camp where the consent was let go by Fish and Game, you just can't get it back. So that's a key thing you've got to watch. The fish screen, historic nature of the water's good. It's a targeted stream orientation in a way. It's putting water, goes in there and goes back to the Ashburton River, which is one of our key things. The Ashburton District Biodiversity Officer applied and received $7,000 2 rounds ago to do some planting and reed control in there. So, you've spent a bit of money on it. So I think the Zone Committee supports what you're trying to do. It just needs a bit more mechanics on it to try and get it across the line so the ADC and ECAN can get up to speed and just see what's possible. But I think as long as that consent is still there, you just want to make sure that's held by someone, so it doesn't expire, which then leaves you in a bit of a mess. I think we've probably had enough on this one. So is there any?
Well, Bill, shouldn't the Zone Committee move a recommendation?
That's just what you're about to do.
Yeah. Okay.
It'd be good company. So you move
to the Regional Council.
Yeah.
To explore opportunities for providing discretion to the Mount Harding Creek group for an exemption to fish screen requirements.
Yeah, and then holding of the consent, but we don't. That'll just come through. We don't.
And anything else that we need to.
So yeah, so the Zone Committee will move that. So Ian's moved that. I'll second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favour? Aye, carried. Thanks.
We appreciate your support and thank you all for your questions, and we'll continue our work and we will do some more fleshing out. I appreciate Angie's suggestion about the fish screen advice, but given what you've just passed as a recommendation, we look forward to hearing back on where that lands. Yeah.
We'll put a timeline on that for you, Ian, too. Not so much for you, but for ECAN to make sure. You're not going to do that.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Next is the Zone Committee workload. So do you want to talk us through that, Jamie?
Okay. So we're up to agenda item number 11, which is the Zone Committee Work Plan 2025. So what the Zone Committee will need to do is confirm what it wants to do with its remaining time. We did have a field trip penciled in. We do have one penciled in for the 25th of March. Which I hope everyone's still happy with. We are kind of putting something together, or Bill and I are putting something together, possibly going to Green Street, then up to, or to Wharekai, around that area, and then also Lake Camp as well. That will likely be a full day trip, and it's expected that councillors from ADC and Environment Canterbury will both be invited as well. I guess, so typically the Zone Committee meets once a month for a workshop or a meeting or a field trip or the likes. And if we're working on the cycle from the previous years, the dates after the March field trip would be the 22nd of April and the 27th of May. looking to wrap up around then. Things that we need to probably consider is it's getting a wee bit challenging to get a quorum with, we've had some numbers drop off. Also, like an option that the Zone Committee may want to consider for, say, workshops and meetings is holding them online. That's also an option. So just keen to hear people's thoughts on what you think would be meaningful for the rest of, leading up to May, June 2025.
I think the silence probably says a lot. I think the field trip, because it's out of here, will be quite beneficial because we really just wanted to invite councillors from both ADC and ECAN, plus the public, to just come up and see what the Zone Committee has achieved and the issues in that high country area. I think after that, it would be difficult to hold meetings to get people to turn up, and maybe we can do something online if there's something important, because we really haven't got. We can't see through any projects or anything from there on. It'd be nice to follow the Mount Harding stream through or something. So I think we'll just deal with it one step at a time. So if everyone's happy to look at a field trip, I'll be happy. That should be the next step, and then we'll worry about the rest later. Mayor Brown?
I'm just looking at my diary for 25th of March, and it's a no-go for me, but I would like to go on the trip. But the 24th of March for me is clear. Okay. And I think ECAN might be the same. Mondays, Fridays are better days of no sort of meetings.
Yeah, because we look at that.
Tuesday the meeting here works quite well, but not always for me either.
Okay.
So
we'll be flexible on dates, sure.
You're probably more flexible than what we are. In
absolutely. Yeah. We want to include the local council, so we'll try and do that. Any other comments? Ange?
Because I guess after we do that trip, there'll be a bit of a wash up of what we find and what we see and what we bring back. If we did a bit of a list of things that as we draw to a conclusion under its current format, we kind of look at the Adrian Meredith. So could we do a list of things that we kind of feel is outstanding in Green Street and Mount Harding and the likes of, and obviously agenda needs to be worthwhile turning up for. I personally think there's enough going on that we could scramble one together, just as a conclusion of a lot of those things that still feel open.
That's a good tie. That's a good point.
Yeah, and I should probably note, like one thing that would be quite valuable for the new structures going forward, which some of the other committees are working on, is identifying the priorities or those outstanding pieces of work that so we can make sure that they're not lost, and it'll help with the priority setting.
Yeah, I think we'll work on that. Is there any other general business? Or just Ardy? So Ardy has handed in his resignation. I think it's a wee bit to do with the Zone Committee closing down, but also he's got a new business to run, which is good. So Ardy, would you like to have a few closing words?
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me be part of this committee for the past 3.5 years. I have learned a lot from this role, and I want to thank everyone and wish everyone good luck with the new evolution of this organization coming up on hopefully on May.
Thank you, Ardy, and we appreciate your contribution that you've made. So I think we can have the closing Karakia. Please, Jamie.
Kia ora noa. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapunui. Kia wātia, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua I te ara takatū. Koe rā e rongo, whakairi ake ki runga kia tina. Hui e, tae ki e. And I'll just as a little, I guess, explanation, that's about drawing on the supreme sacredness, so to speak, to clear and free the heart, the mind and the body for our, I guess in this case, our journeys home or back to our desks. Yes.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you, everyone. It's great.